Hello, today I thought I would look at the track Into the Valley by the great Scottish punk band The Skids. And this one has been quite heavily requested, and I was actually reminded that I needed to look at this track when I did my recent lesson on the Armoury Show. And the Armoury Show, of course, made up of a couple of members of The Skids as well as a couple of members of Magazine, including John McGeoch on guitar, and guitar player in The Skids, another great Scottish guitar player, Stuart Adamson. So I'm going to begin by playing through a bit of this track. I think I'm going to play the intro and a verse, a chorus, and then I'll try and play the solo as best I can, and then we'll break down what's going on. So there we go, and Into the Valley, probably the best known Skids track, I think, and it's such a fun one to play, particularly the main riff, and this riff has actually become my default riff. Whenever I pick up a guitar, I just have to play this riff, and if you ever see me in a guitar shop, that's probably the riff that I'm going to be playing. Let me talk a little bit about Stuart Adamson, and there are actually quite a few parallels with John McGeoch, and both Scottish guitar players, both hugely accomplished and had their own unique style, and both died far too young in quite tragic circumstances, and both of them fans of the Yamaha SG guitar. I think McGeoch liked the SG 1000, whereas Adamson favoured the SG 2000. And in terms of influence, The Edge and Keith Levine of Pill were Stuart Adamson fans, and I'm a fan myself. I do like the Skid stuff and also the Big Country stuff. Stuart Adamson went on to form Big Country after he left the Skids, and I remember Big Country a little bit from when I was a kid, and I think they're a great and quite underrated band. So let's get down to business and I'll show you how this one is played. Let's start with the tuning, and we're tuned down for this one. All of the strings tuned down a tone or a whole step, and I think that's true of most Skids tracks. And I've actually done quite a few detuned tracks lately, and you wait ages for a detuned track to come along, and then we've had three at once. We've had the Link Ray one, Radar, and we had the Surf tune last week, Bullwinkle Part 2, and now we've got this one. And in terms of the notes, we've got D, G, C, F, A, and D. And of course you can play this in standard tuning. It's still going to work, it's still going to sound cool, but you might want to tune down if you want to play it and have it sound like the record, or if you want to play along to the record. So let's start with this main riff, and it's a really clever little riff, and it took me some time to figure out exactly what was going on here, just some careful listening. There are one or two live videos which I've watched. It's a little bit indistinct exactly what Stuart Adamson is doing, but this is what I've arrived at. And I actually checked this riff with a friend of mine who was actually quite good friends with Stuart Adamson, and at one point back in the day he sat down with him and got him to show him how to play this riff, and he confirmed that this is the way that it should be done, so I'm fairly sure this is mostly correct. And it's played using power chords and double stops, and there's a droning open string in there as well. So let's start with this power chord shape here. It's an E power chord, though of course since we're detuned it's sounding as a D, but I'm going to talk about this as though it were in the key of E. So we've got frets 7, 9 and 9 on the A, D and G strings, and we're breaking up this power chord shape. We're starting off by playing strings 4 and 5, and then we're moving over to strings 3 and 4. And all of this riff we're using some palm muting, some quite heavy palm muting at the start of this track. So just have the side of your hand just resting on the strings near the bridge. And then we're going to this little double stop shape. So this is frets 9 and 8 on the D and G strings. So if you like, you can just kind of lift up your little finger and put your second finger down. Although what I'm doing is re-fingering that shape there, and it sets me up for the next part of the riff. So I'm just playing that little double stop with fingers 1 and 2. And then we're going to this shape here. So we've got an open 5th string, and I'm playing fret 11 on the D string. That's the first part of the riff. Just repeats. So you might want to experiment with that fingering thing here. You could just do that, or switch fingers there. It just makes it a tiny bit smoother, I think. Then the next part of the riff. So more double stops. We've got fret 7 on the G and D strings. So I'm playing both of those notes with my first finger, then I'm putting my 3rd finger down at the 9th fret on the G. So, and then going up to this same shape we had previously. So 11 on the D, that droning A string, and going between 11 and 9 on the D string. And then coming down to an E power chord. So, and I'm detecting just a little slide into that 11th fret note. So, and then we're just repeating that last bit of the riff. And there's a little bit of an odd meter thing, an odd time signature thing going on here. The best approach really to this kind of odd time signature stuff is really just to listen to the record and feel it. And once you know that record, you've got the sound of it in your ears, then it's quite easy to follow it without worrying about sort of counting all of this stuff out. But I think there are multiple ways you could count this stuff, but I'm feeling it going to a kind of 3/4 time signature at this point. So 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, something like that. So it's 2 bars of 3, a bar of 6, a bar of 4, and a bar of 2, whichever way you want to count that or feel that. But it sounds like this. And then we go back to the first part of the riff. So let me just put all of that together, the main riff or the intro riff. Then just before we get to the verse, the band comes in and we've just got this section on the E power chord. And at this point in the song, I think for most of the song, you've got multiple guitar tracks, so different layers of guitar. Some of them, I think, doing some slightly different things. So I'm just going to try and give you the main parts to the tune as I'm hearing them. I also read on Wikipedia that some of the guitar parts might have been played by a session player. I think apparently Adamson walked out of the sessions during the recording of the debut album, and some additional guitar parts were done by this session player. I can't remember his name, but I'm assuming that the bulk of this stuff is Adamson's playing. And what's happening here, we're just playing this E power chord. I've got the open low E string here as well, and then frets 7, 9 and 9, so nice full sounding E power chord. Just playing 8 notes with the pick. Occasionally you can throw in some up strums as well. And then I think one of the guitar players I'm hearing doing something like this. So just a little sliding part here. You could slide that entire power chord up and down, or you could just play those top 2 notes in the power chord. Another option might be to go hold down that E power chord and just use your little finger to play fret 11 on the D. So a few different options there, but the way I decided to do it was this. Then we've got the first verse, and this is really the same as the intro riff, except it doesn't have that odd time signature stuff. It's just kind of smoothed out a little bit once the singing starts. So the first verse. Then we're into the chorus, and I'm going to give you some options here with this chorus part. And on the recording you've got these different layers, possibly some of the guitars doing some slightly different things, and it is a little bit hard to hear exactly what's going on. I think the simplest way to play this chorus part would just be to use 3-note power chords. You could do it something like this. So quite a simple power chord based part. This we've just got the E power chord, and then we've got E, then we're moving that shape over to the lower string set. We've got B power chord, G sharp to A, and we repeat that. Then we've got a variation. So we've got A, B, C sharp, sliding down to B, and then the final time through the riff, I'm hearing it like that. So we just got A, B, and an E power chord. So that's option 1, just playing these straight power chords. Option 2, and this is how I did it in my little demo at the start of this video, I was using more of these double stop kind of power chord shapes. So I think this is what Adamson seems to be doing on some live footage, rather than always using these big power chord shapes just in the first part of the chorus. So just using these little double stop shapes. So 9th fret on the G and D, 9th fret on the D and A strings, and then just moving that shape down. Frets 6 to 7. So that's the first part of the riff. And then I'm continuing as before with the bigger power chord shapes. So that's another option that you've got. And one further thing that you might like to try, it's a little bit hard to detect whether this is going on the original recording, but I think it probably is. At least one of the layers of guitar is doing this, and that's just approaching that E power chord from 1 fret below. So we've got that sounds cool as well. That's something you might like to throw in. You could do it every time you play that E chord, or just some of the time. So you've got some options there with this chorus part. So play around with some of those ideas and decide what you like the sound of the best. So next we're going round for another verse, another chorus, then we've got the main riff again, and then we're heading into the guitar solo. So let's talk about this guitar solo. It comes after the second chorus, and you can hear the main riff again. And then we're leading into the solo with this lick. So So it's a kind of country sounding lick almost, and we're in the key of E. Most of the solo is played using the E major pentatonic scale, so if you like you can think about your E major pentatonic scale at the 9th fret. We've got this move here, so 9 to 11 on the A string, and then hitting this B note, and then just climbing up that major pentatonic scale. It's played quite fast. It sounds to me like Adamson is picking every note here, but if that is a bit too fast for you, you can always throw in some hammer-ons there. Makes it a bit easier to get that up to speed. Then we've got this kind of country thing, so bending at 11 on the 3rd string, catching this B note here at 12 on the B string, and then coming down out of that bend. And I think that last note sustains and another guitar takes over and plays the kind of opening lick of the solo proper, but you can combine both of those licks if you want to, if you're just playing it on your own. So the bulk of the solo is made up of this repeated phrase. It sounds to me like it's doubled an octave lower, so you've got this kind of octave underneath. When Adamson plays it live, he's playing it up high, so that's how I've chosen to do it. But I did double it by using an octave pedal, so that's an option that you've got. It's probably double tracked with multiple guitar layers on the recording, but if you've got some kind of pitch shifter pedal, you can get that octave underneath effect. The basic lick is this. So bending at the 19th fret on the top string, and then coming down to 16 on the top string. So really just repeating that 3 times. And you can sometimes detect this E note here, so 17 on the B string, and sometimes going back to that G sharp note. So up to you whether you want to throw that in there or not. Then we've got a little variation. So we've got 19, 17, and then a little trill between 16 and 17 on the top string before hitting that E note. So and then we really just repeat that, but we've got a different lick on the end. So once again, and then the final lick of the solo. So I decided to play that down here at the 12th fret. There are a few different fingering options you've got here, but this seems to flow for me. So we've got a bend at 14 on the top string, and then it's a little major pentatonic phrase once again. So playing around that little pentatonic box shape, and I'm finishing by sliding along the 3rd string from fret 13 down to fret 9. Again, quite kind of chopsy and technical to get that up to speed if you're picking every single note. It does sound to me like he is picking every single note, but if that is a bit fast for you, you could always throw in some fretting hand slurs, some hammer-ons and pull-offs, and that makes it a bit easier to get up to speed. So that's the solo. Let me just try and put all of that together for you. let's talk about gear. And for much of his career, Stuart Adamson was a Yamaha SG2000 user, and I happen to have this guitar here. This is an Eastwood McGeoch 1000, which is their take on a Yamaha SG1000, and it certainly works for this track. I think I'm not sure about the precise differences between the 1000 and 2000 models. I know there are some fairly significant differences in terms of the way they're constructed and the materials, but they both look very, very cool, and perhaps one day I'll get an original 1000 or 2000. Now, amp-wise, I'm not sure what Adamson would have used on this recording or at this stage in his career, so I've just gone with what I thought sounded good. So I'm plugging into my Marshall today, and this is a studio vintage Marshall. It's kind of a plexi style Marshall, and I've done that classic thing that you do with plexi Marshalls where you bridge the two channels together, and I'm also attenuating the volume slightly using the Universal Audio aux box. And I've got a couple of pedals down here as well. I've got my Rat overdrive, and I'm just using that for the solo, just as a bit of a boost and to add a little bit more gain. And then also for the solo, I was stomping on a pitch shift pedal. This is the Electro Harmonics Pitch Fork, which is a great and quite affordable pitch shifter. It's an amazing little pedal, and I've got this set to play an octave below the note that I'm playing, and I've just got that blended in. The blend control is on about 50%, and I think it works really well for this solo. As I say, on the original recording it was probably overdubbed and two separate guitars, but if you're trying to do it on your own, then a pitch shift pedal of some kind is a good solution. Some sounds then, and this is the sound of the guitar just going straight into the Marshall. So just a great rock sound, I think. You can't really go wrong with a guitar with humbuckers plugged into a Marshall style amp. As I said, for the solo I'm just using the Rat pedal, so without the Rat, and then with the Rat. Just adding quite a bit more gain, just a bit more sustain, so it works well as a kind of solo pedal. And then we have the pitch shifter as well, so you can hear that that's just adding a lower octave below the note that I'm playing. And if I turn on the pitch shift and the Rat at the same time, that's it for this one. Hope you found it interesting. I will of course be tabbing everything out. I'll tab out the main riffs and the solo, and that will be up on my Patreon page. And let me know if you'd like to see more Skids, more Stuart Adamson. If you've got any particular song requests, let me know, and maybe I'll be able to get round to one or two of those in the future. Maybe even a big country song would be fun to look at. But thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.